With Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 11, things heat up in a very major way, which is to be expected given everything just happened in the last chapter, and this is what makes this chapter serve as a reminder that the more that things change, the more they stay the same. Coming into Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, we had very clear benchmarks by characters like Sarada and Mitsuki to get strong enough to help assist in the battles against Otsutsuki level threats, and for someone like Konohamaru to take the death of Naruto as motivation to grow stronger, and this chapter proves that in the case of Sarada and Konohamaru, they did accomplish their goals, but the problem is that Boruto is growing at the point where, as the story is currently, he continues to display a supernatural growth rate, and as we'll see later on, that is a huge red flag for Kawaki's character. So as we open up the chapter, we have Himawari emerging from the wood release jutsu that she was previously trapped in, and she lands on the ground. There's a huge thing of note with her appearance we have to take account of. So she's got the appearance of a Jinchuriki who's using Kurama's chakra, but her hair has been split up into 9 long extensions, very similar to the Nine Tails itself. Something we've never seen before out of the 3 prior Jinchuriki of Kurama, from Mito Uzumaki to Kushina Uzumaki in the Minato one-shot manga to Himawari's own father Naruto, and it's our first sign that what Kurama said about Himawari and himself being one body and one soul is what makes her different than all the others and gives her such a high affinity to use his power. Jūra immediately takes note of her transformation, correctly guessing this is the power of the Nine Tails, and for someone such as him, who has been written as a rather philosophical character, constantly questioning the comings and goings of the existence in the Naruto world, he's now intrigued by what he sees from Himawari, and on some level, we're seeing what happens when the primal instincts meets the logical aspects of humanity. The primal instincts of Jūra are telling him this girl that is standing in front of him is using the Nine Tails chakra, and yet at the same time, this is different than what should be what you see with a Jinchuriki, yet the human side of him is curious and he wants to know more, which is a very human thing to do. That insatiable thirst for knowledge and our capacity to process it is what makes us different from animals, and by extension, it's what makes Jūra different from not just the 10 tails that he was made from, but also even his awakened Shinju peers. This leads to Shikadai being used as a vehicle to tell us as the audience that Himawari is using the Nine Tails chakra at an advanced state because her leg was previously broken and now is completely healed, and we see Himawari being used as a bit of a contrast to Jūra, whereas he had been shown being more human, pondering what it was going on with Himawari. We see Himawari just operating off a primal instinct. Without any effort, she just extends her hair like a nine-tailed fox would extend its tails, and she carefully removes the Inojin from the spike that has impaled him, sets him down, and begins to wrap his whole body in Nine Tails chakra to begin rapidly healing his wounds in real time. And in the blink of an eye, Inojin Yamanaka, the newest member of the Donut Club, got his membership canceled because Himawari has closed up the wound that would have killed him had it stayed there any longer. It's at this point that Himawari says she doesn't know how she was able to do what she did, and that she's not sure if she's properly healed Inojin, which is why she orders Shikadai to take Inojin to the hospital and reveals her intention to stay behind to fight Jūra alone. And in this moment here, there's a callback to 2 moments from Naruto's manga. Himawari not really understanding how she used her power, but doing so naturally. That is a callback to Naruto Volume 70, where Naruto healed Kakashi's eye and saved Might Guy without knowing what it was he was doing, and Himawari telling Team 10 to leave. That is a callback to the pain arc where Naruto in Volume 46 ordered everyone in Konoha to stay away from the battlefield, so to be blunt, they didn't get in his way. After Jūra gives Shikadai a compliment, telling him that he was right to tell Chōchō to listen to Himawari and flee from the battlefield before they get themselves killed, he praises Shikadai for his intelligence and vows to commit his name to memory, and says that they will meet again soon, which if you're Shikadai, you gotta be sweating a bit here, because Matsuri had more than one target revealed in Chapter 5 of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex. She chose Konohamaru for who she wanted to consume, but she also stated she could feel a strong attachment to the members of Team 10, directly named them as the Shikadai trio, and now we have Jūra here, someone who is already naturally curious, vowing to pay Shikadai a visit later on, and this leads to Chōchō finally agreeing to leave, but only if Himawari promises to get pancakes, which that is a nice Easter egg to the Boruto Naruto Next Generation anime, where we learn that Himawari's favorite foods are pancakes and that Boruto makes them for her. What we're seeing here is more human emotions being put on display. Chōchō is scared, not just for herself, but mainly for a friend, which is why she made Himawari promise her they'll get pancakes after the fact. It's a coping mechanism to give hope because it allows the mind to feel at ease that they have a future plan, so surely that means Himawari won't lose. But the problem with that is that Himawari is going against Jūra, someone who even Boruto didn't initially want to fight, particularly because it was a 4 versus 1 setting in chapter 4 of the manga, but the point still stands. Once Jūra begins to start talking about the primal nature of humans to protect their comrades and the people that they view as being a part of their pack, as being part of their village, he wonders if by extension seeing Inojin almost die is what triggered this awakening in Himawari, and this is what finally causes Himawari to snap. With a single punch to the stomach, she hits Jūra with enough force to shatter the ground just from the attack itself, and it's with another punch that we see Himawari send Jūra flying, and this is where a rather interesting aspect of Himawari right now tends to get overlooked by the fandom, so I'm gonna shed some light onto the situation. The ground shattering from the force of her first attack, it is a sign that while she is using a high volume of chakra and she is picking up on using it very quickly, she is still very raw. She doesn't have the skill to contain the area damage from her attack. It's starting to spread out just with her first moves by themselves. By contrast, when you look at Naruto, someone who is more skilled in battle, more used to operating with that high volume of chakra, look at the battle with Delta in the Boruto manga. There was more control over the area damage as they went into their taijutsu barrage. The landscape, for the most part, it was not being altered by any of Naruto's attacks. When his punches landed, the shockwaves, they didn't crack the ground they were standing on. The area damage was contained to Delta. The most damage that he did outside of his super giant Rasengan that took down Delta was when he had to jump in the air and kick her into a chunk of the debris at the Hokage training ground. Even in Boruto chapter 52, when he was wielding that enormous power of Baryon mode, he kept the area damage limited only to his attacks. The only time he damaged the area was when he threw Ishiki's chakra cubes, and once again when he had to kick Ishiki from the air and into the ground. Right now, Himawari, she has this enormous power inside of her, but she is literally learning to use it as she's fighting, and she's basically being used as Broly from the Dragon Ball Super movie, where Vegeta is astonished at how quickly Broly is adapting as they're fighting. Himawari's doing the same thing here. She's doing it off of pure instinct, and she's doing it now without Kurama's help. After Jūra uses the momentum of her attack to fly upwards into the air and he begins to rocket downwards towards Himawari, her hair begins to form around her body like tails do, in particular how Four Tails Naruto fired off his Bijudama at Orochimaru, and Himawari starts making her own Bijudama, which that is enough to make Jūra halt his momentum and instead prepare to fire off his own Bijudama, and this leads to the two attacks colliding several hundreds of feet up in the air. It makes this massive shockwave that can be seen from afar, and it lets us know that had this attack been fired off when they're on the ground, they would have nuked the whole area. This rightfully fascinates Jūra because of how rapidly she's beginning to advance, and this is enough to make Jūra take the approach that, hey, equal rights means equal lefts. He blitzes Himawari and begins to go on the offensive by headbutting her, and before she can recover, he's already in the air above her, and he delivers a downward kick right to the back of her head that sends her face flying into the ground so hard it begins to split, in a sequence that was paneled as clear as day as homage to the recently deceased Akira Toriyama, the mangaka who brought us the Dragon Ball manga, who also heavily influenced Ikimoto, and we see Jūra state that for the first time he is curious about what it feels like to fight Himawari using full power, and that alone begins to start answering your question of was Jūra taking this fight serious up until now, and the answer was no, which it should be pretty obvious given 2 chapters ago the guy was willingly letting himself be held captive by the Shadow Strangle Jutsu that Shikadai used and allowed Chōchō to use the expansion jutsu to knock him backwards, and upon hearing this reveal of Jūra's intentions, Himawari begins to start coughing up blood, and we transition over to Sarada versus Hidari. Here we see Sarada beginning to take charge of the situation, trying to interrogate Hidari by first informing informing him of the severity of the damage her jutsu inflicted on him, but she also asks why is it that she can use her father's jutsu, and she wants to know what Hidari is. And this, my friends, is the moment where we got to start giving Boruto the collective side eye, because Sarada's words confirm what you've probably been suspecting. Boruto never told her that the awakened Shinju what they are, or that one of them looks like a darker skinned version of her father. The only thing she knows is that when people get bit by the claw grimes, they turn into a tree, but this part she doesn't know. All she knows right now is that this thing seemingly has Sasuke's chakra signature. He can use Code's jutsu. He also has the Rinnegan, and that's the extent of her knowledge. If she knew this info, she wouldn't have been caught off guard, which we can chalk that more so up to Boruto being interrupted by Mitsuki for their fight, so there's still some details Sarada didn't know. Hidari doesn't answer her question, but instead starts moving through the claw marks and comes out of one closer to Sarada, this time being fully healed, and Hidari reveals that Jūra had previously told him about the Sharingan eyes, and Hidari had already pieced together he needs the Sharingan that Sarada possesses to properly use it. And this is where some of you guys might have confusion. You are probably going, hey, Madara and Orochimaru and Kabuto, they're some of the smartest guys in the series. They had this theory about the Rinnegan being the final evolved state of the Sharingan, but here's the thing, they are wrong. So not every Uchiha can awaken the Rinnegan. That's not possible. So that's why Obito didn't transform into a Rinnegan eye despite having Hashirama's chakra. It's as Hagoromo tells us in volume 70 of Naruto, you need to mix both Ashura and Indra's chakra together to get the Rinnegan, or you need to be directly given the eye by Hagoromo, as we learn in Naruto Databook 4, which is what he did to Sasuke, hence Sasuke got his eye within moments instead of waiting 20 years like Madara. The awakened Shinju have a Rinnegan because they come from the Ten Tails, but the Rinnegan does not have any precognition powers of the Sharingan eye insight. Similar to how even though the Sharingan is an evolved mutation of the Byakugan, it can't see the chakra network, but it can see chakra as a color. The Rinnegan does not have precognition unless you have the Tomo in the eye like Sasuke did, which is why Hidari was hit by Sarada's previous Chidori, and this is where things start to heat up. As Konohamaru continues asking Hidari questions like what is he and how is he related to Sasuke, Class Rep is one that figures out Hidari's main target is Sarada, and she starts freaking out for Sarada's safety. And while that is impressive that she picked up on it so quickly, a huge testament to her perception is also an example of the Japanese expression that the nail that sticks out, it gets hammered in, because Hidari has taken note of her, but right now she comes second to Sarada because Hidari notices that Sarada is looking at Class Rep out the corner of her eye, and if you go back to the prior panel where he says that's why he came to Konoha, his hand, in particular the one with the glove on it, it was at his side, yet while Sarada's attention is divided, his hand has now been moved to his pocket, which serves as a claw mark to move his hand behind Sarada and attack her with a lightning release jutsu while she is off guard. A ninja must see through deception, and in this very moment, Sarada is one who got deceived. Now, this is where I want to clear something up. So you might be going, wait a second, how did Sarada get tagged here? So let me explain. Sarada getting tagged here, it was brilliant writing when you look at what Hidari did in this moment. If you go back to when we first get to this scene and she's interrogating Hidari, there's no claw mark that is shown behind her when they're looking down at Hidari, yet Hidari attacked from behind. So when did he place that marker? How did he place that marker? It was a split second when Sarada, who doesn't have her Sharingan on, looks out the corner of her eye at Class Rep as Class Rep is speaking, saying Sarada's in danger, and Hidari in that moment, he spawned a claw mark, which as long as it's within the field of vision, it can be placed by anyone using code Shinjutsu, which is how he electrocuted Sarada before Class Rep could even continue speaking. That's how Sarada got caught off guard. This leads to her falling over and the tuning with Konohamaru. He attempts to step in, but he gets burned alive by a fire release jutsu before Sarada can fully fall to her knees, and Konohamaru steps in right away with her Rasengan, but now the situation, it is escalating. He rushes in with the Rasengan, and what we see here is that Hidari has taken in the awareness that the Chidori has a weakness, and so because he knows he's vulnerable for a counterattack, he teleports to the claw mark behind Konohamaru, grabs hold of his leg to stabilize him, and attempts to use Chidori. However, Konohamaru, being the grandson of the third Hokage, is no slouch, and so instead of trying to dodge the attack, Konohamaru turns around and uses a new wind release jutsu, which makes a vortex barrier, which applies wind release change in chakra nature, which is superior to lightning release released chakra nature and adds a change in chakra's shape to reinforce it and make it stronger. And it's just strong enough to protect Konohamaru from the attack, but it sends him flying backwards and it knocks him out cold. This leads to Hidari teleporting behind Class Rep and hitting her with the same attack that knocks Sarada onto her knees, but due to Class Rep not having Sarada's durability, she crashes onto the ground unconscious. This, of course, transitions us back over to Himawari, who is getting the life beaten out of her by Jūra, who at this point, he's just toying with her. He's firing off a mini Biju Dama at her side just to inflict damage so he can see how fast she regenerates, and this is where it gets very interesting. Jūra says that despite having the high cost of the regeneration in terms of the chakra it requires, which is impressive on her side, he states that she is just like he and the other awakened Shinju. Himawari is more than a human, and she's something more than a Jinchuriki, which is what we've been saying over here on the channel, and it goes back to why she has a higher affinity than Naruto. She was born with a small seed of the Nine-Tails because her father was a Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, and we, up until this point in the timeline, have never seen a male Jinchuriki have children. And when Kurama died using burial mode, that chakra of Kurama transmigrated over to Himawari, but Kurama begins to freak out because despite her natural talent, Jūra is just being blunt, too strong for her to deal with, and this is where the stakes raise even higher. That flying nuclear weapon known as Kawaki has just got another reason to dislike Boruto, because Delta's asking quite out loud. She's going, hey, what are you going to do against someone who is just that much stronger than you, has already whooped your ass before? And within seconds, a black blur, it streaks past them at high speeds, and Kawaki realizes this is Boruto. And this just speaks at the alarming rate of Boruto's growth. The guy in the last day has fought 3 battles back to back, was further away from the area than Kawaki, actively trying to suppress Momoshiki from emerging, and despite Kawaki getting a head start towards Himawari, Boruto just blitzes past them, arrives at the battlefield to save Himawari before Kawaki can even get there. The timing of this is really intentional by the narrator. So here's the thing, Kawaki was just verbally reminded by Delta that he is outclassed, and now he's seeing another of his targets he wants to kill, Boruto, just casually fly past him at speeds he can't keep up with. And that is a physical reminder that Kawaki is outside his weight class for this fight. And it's just another layer to the eventual explosion known as the Otsutsuki nuclear weapon that goes by the name Kawaki Uzumaki. But this isn't going to go over very well with them, especially since Boruto, he's on pace right now to save the village twice in 24 hours. Meanwhile, as Boruto begins to take flight holding Himawari, Sarada has now been pinned down by Hidari, who has transformed his hand into a tree branch, and he is in the process of beginning to devour her, similar to how Jūra was going to do to Himawari in the last chapter, trapping her in her tree. But Sarada catches sight of the toad that's sitting on the light post, is holding Boruto's flying Raijin marker, and the toad inside of Boruto's cloak relays the situation of Sarada, and Boruto teleports right away using the flying Raijin and begins to draw his sword with a pissed off expression on his face, and he takes his free hand, he cuts Sarada free of the attack, and this moment right here is huge. Boruto had to save Sarada, and I'll explain why. This isn't, oh my god, damsel in distress. Let me tell you what you're missing. So Boruto, he needed this moment. In chapter 5, he was too weak and he was too unskilled to fight alongside his master Sasuke in his final moments. His sword was broken and he had to run away in shame, and he was left with the words of Sasuke where Boruto had to promise him that he would look after Sarada for Sasuke. And Boruto, saving Sarada in this moment from the same fate of her father, is meant to right the wrong of what happened in the past with Sasuke 2 years ago. He failed her father, but he's not going to fail her. It's a super poetic moment, and the chapter ends off with Jūra being annoyed at Boruto once again, swooping in and teleporting away, and Hidari refers to Boruto as Boruto Otsutsuki, setting the stage for the upcoming battle. This was a really good setup chapter that gave us a lot of clarification in terms of the power scaling, and it cleared a lot of the stage for the fights themselves. But the real heart of this chapter is seeing the limitations of Himawari in terms of how much further she still has to grow, and Boruto arriving to save Sarada from the Shinju version of her father to help her fight alongside her in that battle and right the wrongs of his past failures, which it just goes back to the samurai tradition that inspired the Sasuke and Boruto relationship, because both of those characters, Boruto and Sasuke, they are so heavily rooted in old samurai stories that you really have to go back and kind of brush up on your history and some of the culture references, because it explains so much about the burdens that each of them are carrying and why in this moment Boruto had to save Sarada, which this video on the left breaks down. And over here on the right, we have that mega 2.5-hour Boruto video that extensively breaks down Boruto Part 1 in its entirety.